episode 12 now, this is. So, for those of you who are going to complain about the camera quality, I apologize in advance. It's 5 o'clock already, and I had to go to the gym and do other stuff today. So, artificial light it is, and the camera quality looks even worse in this lighting compared to when I normally do it. I will get a camera at some point, okay? So, what I want to talk about today is... So, I mentioned this, I can't remember who commented it, but it was either in one of my YouTube or TikTok comments. And I said a statement, just as sort of a throwaway comment, which I do believe, which is that I believe that being a number 10, and especially in elite level number 10, is harder than being elite level number 9. And someone was said, can you expand on that? And I was like, yeah, sure, I've got no problem expanding on the views I have. So, naturally, this video came. So, the first thing I want to get out the way is, just because your job is harder doesn't mean you're automatically better, right? Let's just take one example. For example, Van Dijk, at his best, when he was in 18 to 22 Liverpool, and they had that suicide line with Klopp, and Cristiano Ronaldo 2012. Van Dijk's job was harder. He had to cover the entire left side of the pitch, right? That entire left side was just left alone to him. He had no support, he had no help, because the coverage with Fabinho was sort of shaded over towards the right-hand side, and Virgil was just left on an island by himself, and teams would still not attack down his side. His job was harder than what Cristiano's was in, say, 2012, when he was scoring and progressing and creating for Real Madrid. Because at the end of the day, he had other guys that he could split the load with. Ozil could be a primary creative guy. You had Benzema who could take up some of the goal-scoring load. You had other guys who could help create and get the ball up the pitch because of the fact that Madrid had so many fantastic players. Cristiano Ronaldo, at his peak in 2012, was clearly a better player than what Virgil van Dijk is, and was when he was at his peak. But Van Dijk's job was harder. So this isn't about who's better. This is simply about what is harder, because someone asked me to expand upon it, and I thought it'd make an interesting video. So the first thing I want to say, and even just to add on to that, hanging steel buildings is harder than being a footballer. Being a footballer is universally recognized as a better job than hanging steel buildings, right? So again, this isn't anything to do with naturally what type of players are better. It's simply about whose job is harder, hence the video. So, in layman's terms initially, a 10's job is harder because of the fact that the whole attack has to run through them, whether they're great or not when you have the number 10. So say if we take Lionel Messi and we take Bruno Fernandes, Messi is obviously one of the greatest number 10s ever. When he plays there. He does not play there a huge amount in his career, but obviously when he does play there, he's obviously one of the... False nines can be brought into this equation too, depending on what type of role they have. So say Neymar in 2021 was a number 10 in his role, even though his listed position was a false 9. So Bruno Fernandes, I don't believe is an elite number 10 for an elite level team, because of the fact that he has too many flaws in his game to really and truly be that and maximize his and the squad's capabilities, because of the fact that I don't believe he has the temperament or the quality to do that. Lionel Messi can, regardless. Bruno's not an elite 10, Messi is, but regardless, the whole attack has to go through them. So whether you're maybe the best ever, or whether you're just some middling number 10 when it comes to an all-time status thing, the whole attack has to go through you because of the size. Because of the size of your remit across the pitch. So say your remit as a number 10 probably stretches from the penalty spot up until probably about 50, 60 yards from goal in settled play. And in reality, it probably stretches all the way back to 45 yards from your own goal. So you have a massive remit. So we're talking probably about and that's just in terms of a straight line. Obviously, you have the area which goes in as well. And I don't know. I'm not doing a length times breadth thing or whatever it is. This isn't year 4 maths class, but regardless, the area which is your section of responsibility as a number 10 is larger than anything else on the pitch when it goes past, and even past the centre-back really, because even normal centre-backs don't have to cover entire halves of a pitch like Virgil van Dijk did. I use Van Dijk because the way which he was used by Klopp is almost impossible for any other centre-back ever. because you need to be insanely smart, insanely fast, and insanely physically gifted. But I digress. So again, the entire thing has to go through you, whether you're elite level or whether you're not. So naturally, you eat up the most space, and you end up doing that. So, and the thing is, even when a 10 declines somewhat, so like say when Messi declined at PSG, especially those first season there, when he fully gave the keys over to Mbappe by December time, because he just wasn't as good anymore. Players still look for him because of the fact that he is the guy with the most positional freedom all over the pitch. He's the guy who naturally has the most technical quality within the entire team. He's normally the smartest player as well. He picks the ball up, he goes at guys, he'll play a pass here to open up the defense here, and 3 passes later, that's what opens up this and that. They will naturally be looked for as the most important and the most invaluable players within the team initially, even though they are not necessarily that at the juncture which these things may be going on. So ultimately what you end up doing is you still end up facing the most attention even when you aren't necessarily the best anymore. So the players would still naturally give the ball to you. So now, why is their job so hard relative to a number 9's? Christ, I got an itchy nose. Not fun. So if we look at a number 9 in a traditional sense, their space normally is pretty much on the last line. So you're either with centre-back, or if you run the challenge, you have the centre-back and the full-back. So naturally you have 2 guys with you, so 4 eyes. And you're largely off the ball, and you're not really a mass creator, and you're largely off the ball. Like, you're pretty much reliant on your off-ball movement. So if we take the best striker today, Erling Haaland, his game is predominantly based off of off-the-ball movement. Right? Anyone could tell you this. Anyone who watches Haaland could tell you this. So it's more likely that defenders are going to switch off. It's more likely that guys are going to bull watch and you slip out of their line of sight, as opposed to them falling asleep with a guy who's on the ball. They're more likely to be attracted towards the guy who's on the ball and so slip off and things like that. So now what you end up doing is you can go little spells without touching the ball and things like that. So the attack doesn't run through you, and you're not a mass creator. That's just simply not your job as a traditional elite level player. So some smartass is going to bring up Harold Kane. Harry Kane is not an all-time great striker, so don't give me that nonsense. So you can keep him. So even if we just go purely on a numerical standpoint, you have 4 eyes as opposed to more. So with the number 10, the entire scheme, especially when they're elite level, the entire scheme is based around the elite level number 10. And they have to drift everywhere. Like I said, their remit goes from probably the penalty spot up until maybe the centre circle, which is stretching in their own half, maybe even a bit further back, depending on the environment within the game and depending on how hard it is for the team to advance. Like, I remember plenty of times when Neymar would have to drop into PSG's half where he was only 40 yards from his own goal, and he was having to pick the ball up from the midfield who was struggling to get the ball out, or, Marquinhos was struggling to get it, so he has to get the ball up to him that way. I remember plenty of those occasions, and so your remit can stretch to an insane level, and your level of responsibility is ridiculously hard. And ultimately, level of responsibility can sometimes coincide with the level of difficulty which you face. But even if we just look at it in terms of subtle possession, the 10 usually will have 2 centre-backs, and he will have the 2 midfielders. So let's say that you're 30 yards from goal, and there's a deep block. The 10 can be receiving the ball between the 2 lines, as in danger between the lines. And he can be receiving the ball there, and it can make his job a lot harder because of the fact that there is simply just so much less space. And less space means less time, because of the fact that when you're that compact and you're that close together, naturally guys are going to gravitate towards the ball. If the guy is wider, you end up having a fullback, a centre-back, and a central midfielder shading over there. And depending on who the guy is, maybe sometimes you end up getting a winger back there as well. So a top-level guy who's a number 10 will always have 3 to 4 guys within his vicinity, within his bubble of space, right? 6 to 8 eyeballs, as opposed to a striker who usually will cap out at 4 eyes, 2 guys. And the thing is, the other thing is, which I think is important to factor in here in terms of difficulty, you can be taught to a certain degree how to move off the ball. Let's take Cristiano Ronaldo, for example. He's the shining light example of this. He is someone who never moved off the ball when he first came to United. He was someone who was totally on the ball. He wasn't someone who ever ran in behind. He wasn't someone who'd make pass post runs. He wasn't someone who would fake front post and go back post, or fake back post and cut across the guy to go front post. He wasn't someone who knew how to make the run, stop, pause, and do that jagged stop, open up the space for a cutback, all those different types of things. He did not begin to do those things until far later in his career. You can be taught that. But something like what Neymar does, something like what Messi did, something like what Maradona would do, those things are not coachable. You cannot be taught how to know where to pick up the ball and, okay, if I pick up the ball here, there's probably going to be a guy at my back shoulder, or there's probably going to be a guy who's closing on in this space, but okay, if this guy's coming here, then that pass is going over here because that means there's more space for that guy over there. All those different types of things. You can be taught what to do when you have those certain situations, but there's a certain natural feel and inclination that some guys are just born with that can't be taught, and ultimately that goes into the level of difficulty as well. It's not nice, but it's simply the way it is, and unfortunately that is always going to be the way it is, just because of the fact that you can be taught technique and moving off the ball and things like that. You can't be taught natural intrinsic understanding and feel and see things before they happen. It's impossible. It's like I say, if we were to go cross sports and we were to have, say, LeBron James, the reason why he is one of the best playmakers ever is because he sees things before they happen. Whereas, say, a guy like Kevin Durant, who is probably the consensus second or third best player of his era behind Steph Curry, it's him and Steph Curry jostling for that second place. I think Kawhi peaked higher than both of those, but that's an entirely different conversation. But, say, Durant couldn't see things before they happened. Durant would make the read and he'd say, okay, if I do this, this guy's probably going to come here because I've seen this thing happen over and over, which means I can kick it to the corner. Whereas a guy like LeBron, he will come off and be like, okay, right, he's probably going to come here, which means he's going to rotate there, which means I can give the pass here. But ultimately, if I stop and pause, some guy's going to come in here and now, bang, I hit the roller. And some guys think 1 step or 2 steps down. Other guys think 5 steps and 6 steps. And the elite 10s, they think 5 steps and 6 steps as opposed to just 1 step or 2 step, which is ultimately what makes those guys so special and those guys so unique. But again, not anyone can do that, which is what makes their life so difficult, because they're given the entire keys to an attack. Their teammates know everything's going through this guy. The opposition knows everything's going through this guy. The opposition builds an entire plan to stop things going through this guy, to stop this guy getting the ball in areas which he can hurt them. And it simply doesn't matter, because the guy is simply that good. But it also, if you look at all those things which are brought in, everyone knows, you know, he knows, the other guy knows, the fans on the TV know, the fans in the stands know. Someone who has only watched football for a short amount of time knows, okay, they're going to stop the ball getting to him. And they're going to stop the ball getting to him in any type of place. This isn't like a striker where it's like, okay, he's in the 6-yard box. Right, okay, there's only certain things you can do when a guy receives the ball in certain areas, because of the fact that he's somewhat dependent on service. If you stop the service, then you stop the guy. But with the number 10, you have to stop. How do you stop him getting the ball 40 yards from his own goal? How do you stop him beating 2 or 3 guys, releasing the pass, and 2-3 passes later, okay, now he's open again, now he receives the ball, and he's going to spread the ball over to that right side, and then someone's going to cross the ball into the box, and then there's a header for the number 9. How can you possibly account for all of those different outcomes and all of those different things which you have? You can't scheme against that. It's very hard to scheme against that when they're elite level. But that's why it's so hard to be elite level, because of the fact that how many guys can just do the sequence which I tried to lay out for you? I understand it's difficult. I don't have like visual boards or any of this nonsense, right? I'm in my bloody living room. Like, there's only so many guys that can do that. Because let's take Neymar, for example. He's the worst out of the all-time great number 10s, I think. He's a guy, him or Ronaldinho, right? Whatever. He will take the ball from the centre-backs, 40 yards from his own goal. He will face a guy. He'll beat one guy. So he'll beat the furthest of the midfield through, or he'll beat the number 10. He'll go past. Another guy comes through. Okay, he'll go past him. Now, okay, some space is opened up for his teammates. Right, okay, now I'm going to spread the ball out to the left. Now I'm going to spread the ball out to, say, Nuno Mendes, right? He's going to feed the ball to Mbappe. Okay, Mbappe's got 2v1. He draws some guys in. He gives the ball back to Neymar in the left half space. Right, Neymar. Okay, you have two centre backs. You have the full back and you have the centre back in front of you. You have the number 6 at your backside. The opposition number 6 this is. He's closing in. Okay, now Neymar has to shift the ball over. He spreads the ball over to the right back, whether it be Hakimi or whether it be Di Maria. They move it, cross the ball into the box, and now Cavani gets onto the end of the cross. One guy has orchestrated that entire thing, and I know those guys didn't necessarily play together because Cavani didn't play with Nuno Mendes or Hakimi or things like that. Just indulge it, right? I'm just making names up on the spot based off previous teammates, right? Whatever. So you have all these different actions, but how many guys can even do that? Bruno? No, he can't. De Bruyne can't do that. And those are probably the two consensus best numbers. And Florian Wirtz can't do that. Bellingham can't do that. Phil Foden can't do that. Eden Hazard can't do that because he didn't have the passing range. Like, being an elite number 10 and having everything run through you, it's like the sun. Neymar is the sun. Messi is the sun. Every planet orbits around them because of the fact that they have such a very unique skill set, which is so hard to replicate. So that's all it is, right? But that's why it's so hard to... So as hard as it is to scheme against it, it's also equally as hard to be that. Because of the fact that if you think they've had to deal with all world schemes put against them, they've had to deal with the entire attention of the opposition since they were 7 years old, and it didn't matter, and they still reached the levels which they reached as an individual. So that's where it comes from. That's what makes it purely so difficult, as opposed to being a wide forward who comes in and they get to see every angle of the pitch, right? Because of the fact that defenders aren't going to come at you from. So let's say you're going here. Defenders aren't going to come at you from there, and you don't spot them because of the fact that you're on the touchline. The only place that they come from is here, and if your peripheral vision is relatively good, you can see from. Like I say, I'm looking over here right now. There's a fireplace, but I can still see the sofa and this new canvas that's just been put up here. I can see all those things. It's not a very good example, I'm aware, because obviously I know the layout of this room since I was 2 years old or whatever. No, a year, what, 14 months. 14, 15 months, whenever it was I moved into this house. So, no, not 14, 15, 21 years essentially, because that should give you a decent indication of how old I am. But there's only so many things you can do to mess it up, and there's only so many things the opposition can do to mess it up, because they're not going to vacate the entire area of the pitch to go and touch you when you're hugging touchlines. But when you're in the middle of the pitch, and this is the most dangerous, most direct route to go, guys are going to come in and they are going to do this, which is ultimately another thing of what makes it simply so hard to simply so hard to do all these things. Like, there's less space, there's less time to think, and when there's less space and less time to think, you have to do things quicker. And for you to still operate at such a high level speed, cognition-wise, and for you to still do all this, people talk about quarterbacks in the sport, and they always call the number 6 the quarterback. And they misunderstand what the quarterback actually is. The quarterback is the guy who runs every single play for the offensive team. So people in the past have liked to call Busquets a quarterback, or Pirlo a quarterback, or Gerrard in 2014 a quarterback. Those guys fit the description in terms of the traditional, he's standing back there and he's going to spray a pass. You know, he's hitting the receiver, right? It's Tom Brady hitting Randy Moss. But in reality, anyone who has the entire attack running through them is the number 10. No, is the quarterback. Lionel Messi was the quarterback. Neymar was the quarterback. Diego Maradona was the quarterback. Why? Because every single attack ran through them. They were the ones making decisions. They were the ones who decided who gets the ball, who doesn't get the ball. They're the ones who decide, okay, you take up this space, you take up that space. Okay, I'm going to lead you here with my eyes and all these different types of things. You're the guy who handles the ball on every snap. That's simply what it is. There is never going to, and if you don't touch the ball when the ball has been snapped, it's a surprise. That's the type of level, which is why these guys would end up having games with 130 touches, 140 touches. Because of the fact that they were touching the ball every 40 seconds, every 50 seconds, no, 30, 40, 50 seconds. It's insane the level of touch volume which these guys had. And again, having that many touches is not easy either. This is why, especially when you're on an attacking team and you're on an attacking role, having that level of touches is not an easy thing. And people like to discount it and downplay it to fuel their own agendas when that is ultimately such an insane thing. Do you know how hard it is to operate when the entire team... It's like when people talk about Palmer. saying, oh, it's easy. He gets every single touch. Okay. You could give, say, I don't know, Chris Wood. You could drop him in number 10. You could give him every single touch. He's not gonna play as well as a guy like Cole Palmer is doing. And again, that doesn't necessarily mean that Cole Palmer is better than a guy. That's not why Cole Palmer is better than Chris Wood. It's not because he plays deeper. It's because he does other things and he brings more value to a team. I'm just using Chris Wood as the sake of this because he's the first player which came to mind. Like, it's a complex thing, but ultimate, and there's so many different layers to it and things like that. But yeah, this entire thing is like, it's not about proving who's better. It's simply about proving whose job is harder. And the more responsibility you have, it tends to be that your job is harder. Like, think about your job, for example. The more things which you have to do, the harder your life becomes. It's just that simple, right? Whether you're in charge of a shop floor, a Tesco, and you're the guy who's making sure that all the fruit and veg, like, your job is harder when you have to focus on keeping the fruit and veg stocked up on the shelves, and you have to focus on managing the other 3 or 4 guys who are doing it, as opposed to just doing it in your one department. Yeah, I'm a bit rusty on that. I left Tesco a few years ago now. But say if you're in a sales, or even if you're in a sales role, right? If your role is simply as connector, or even if your role is simply as connector, you're ringing people every single day, setting up meetings to go to your business development director or account manager or account exec, whatever. No, account exec, but whatever. When you have, and you're doing that versus where you have to be an account executive where you're managing the whole cycle, it's a lot harder because there's more on your plate. The same principle applies in football. The more things you have to do, the harder your job is. Now, the sales rep might be better at his job than the account exec is at his. Okay, fine. But that doesn't mean that his job isn't harder. So a sales rep feasibly, depending on the commission structure, he could feasibly make more in a year than the account exec if the account exec is pants at his job. But that doesn't mean that his job isn't harder. Now, do you have to give him the boot and get someone who's qualified to get the job in? Yes, of course you do, which is why you pay one guy 60, 70,000 pounds a year to do it, and the other guy only gets 30 to 40 grand in a year, right? That's what this is. But that doesn't mean his job isn't hard. It's the same thing with the number 10 and the number 9 and the other guys, right? And that, again, this isn't about why 10s are better than 9s. That's an entirely separate conversation, which I will have another time, but this isn't about that. This is simply about whose job is harder and whose job is more difficult. So, I mean, even if we go back to 9, so let's say, look at Haaland, for example. His job description, essentially, is you stay on the final line, you run in behind, and you pin the centre back, and you hold position to help us pin the opposition back. Whereas if you look at Neymar, he has 50% of eyes on him at all time, probably, really, because he has the centre backs, he has 2 midfielders, and he probably has the full back from the side, which he's leaning towards, so likely the left side. So he's got the right back, eyes on him as well. That's five people out of 10 outfield players. That's 50%. Whereas Haaland is at most probably going to have 30%. Realistically, it's going to be more like 20%. And if it's a back 3, it's still only going to be 20% because it's going to be the guy who's over, right? Some guys will shift over depending on the positioning and lines and all things like that. But for the most part, it's still just going to be around 20% of the outfield players. Now, again, 9s, of course, can be better. For example, Radamel Falcao is better than Bruno. Falcao, at his peak from 2011 or 12 to up to about 2013, 14, whenever he popped his knee in half, he is better than Bruno Fernandes is at his best. He's just a better player. He's a guy who provides more value to a winning team. He's a more valuable player for the absolute best teams because of what he brought to the table as opposed to what Bruno brings to the table. But Bruno's job is objectively harder. And it goes back to the connector versus the executive thing. Now, obviously, this isn't entirely the same thing because Bruno will get paid more regardless. But regardless, I think you should understand the point. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that what 9s do isn't valuable. Or what 9s do is more valuable. Because at the end of the day, it always is. Scoring goals is always going to be valuable, right? This isn't what this is. This is simply what is harder and more difficult to do on a game-to-game basis. Like, it's a whole separate conversation as to why number 10s are better than number... It's a whole different conversation as to why Lionel Messi is better than Cristiano Ronaldo, or why Lionel Messi is better than Romario, or why Diego Maradona is better than, Van Basten. It's a whole different conversation. But ultimately, this is simply just about who is better, whose job is more difficult. Now, difficulty and better, can they go hand in hand? Perhaps, right? I'm not denying that that's, a case. But nonetheless, that's just what it is. Now, and honestly, the best evidence as to why the number 10 is a harder job is that the number 10 is almost dying out. It's that difficult to be an elite level number 10 that the position has almost been extinct for the past 10 years. How many new elite level number 10s have come through? I'd probably say James is the only guy who, and even then, right? How long was he number 10 for? For the absolute best teams. I think he was done in 2019 when he was done at Bayern Munich. Because he did it from Monaco, fine, they're not one of the best teams. Then he did it for Madrid for a year and a half, and then he was benched. So he wasn't even that. And then then he moved to Bayern, and he was then he was the number 10 over there for a while. How many guys have come through in the last few years, have been a 10 and stayed a 10? Palmer's still very new on this journey. Even Bernardo Silva is almost viewed as a number 10. He was the guy who played wider for Monaco. He wasn't the guy who's playing number 10. If any, Mbappe was the number 10 for that team. He was the second striker to Falcao. So how many guys have really done that in the past however many years it is? So, it's so hard to play, and it's too risky to trust a young player with that level of responsibility. It's better to just kill the position. It's better to just do it because of the fact that you've had guys with, Musial is probably the only one. He's the only one I can think of recently who came through as a number 10 and he stayed as a number 10. That's it. Wirtz has began to. I don't think he's going to. I do believe that the 10 is making a comeback, for what it's worth. But to take a position which is so hard, with such responsibility, and to give it to just anyone, it's hard. So it's almost easier to just kill it and make them part of a cog in a machine. And even when I say 10s, these are guys who just have specific roles in it. They're not conductors. They're not quarterbacks. They're not touching the ball every time down the field. It is a very different type of number 10 role that they are playing relative to what people used to play. Like I said, I do think it'll make its return. I do think it's making a comeback because wingers are going wider now. Right footers are playing on the right and lefties on the left, and number 9s are going forward and they're stretching the pitch. So naturally, instead of everything being here, things are more like here. So the wingers aren't. So it's not like this. It's more like. How am I going to do this? I don't know how I'm going to do this. It's about doing some sort of weird gesture. So I don't know. I only have one pen here as well. See, this is how off the cuff these things are, right? So it's not like 3. Can you see my 3 fingers? Yeah, you can. So it's not like 3. So 10 winger. Now it's more like even then, right? It's more like I can't do it, right? But it's 1, 2, 3. Ah, yes, perfect. I have drawstrings. So it's not like, this is going to look super weird. But no, I'm not going to do this. That looks super stupid. But it's not like 1, 2, 3. It's not like I knows I. It's like, imagine my eyes were stretched out here. Right? I1, I2, number 10. Yeah, that's the way we're going to do this. So it's not like here. That's the way it's not been for a while. It's been more like here. Now it's all the way out here. Jesus Christ. That was such an awful explanation. But the point is that the pitch is becoming more stretched. And the more spaced out and stretched the pitch is, and you have a guy going further forward ahead of you, the more space that opens up for guys in behind. And with that, you will see a resurgence in the number 10. But for it to truly make a comeback, a genius is going to have to come through. I think that someone who is unquestionably an all-time talent is going to have to come through. So I don't know when it's going to happen. Right? I don't think it's going to happen in the next few years. But I do think it will come back. Because ultimately, and it's going to take a brave coach to trust that type of genius come through. Now, people are talking about Lamine Yamal. People always talk about Yamal and he's naturally going to progress to a number 10. He's going to be one of the best ever. No, I don't think he will. He doesn't have the prerequisite athleticism, but that's a whole different conversation. Those guys are truly one-of-one talents, and they bring the rest of the guys through. For example, Pele did it. Then you have Cruyff doing it. Then you have Diego doing it, and then obviously you have that elite level generations of them. You have Baggio, you have Totti, you have Del Piero, all coming through. You have Riquelme across the other side. You have a whole host of guys who come through. Obviously, you have Ronaldinho as well. He was a number 10, if you will. All these different types of guys, they came through. Kaká, all these different, like, this is a bit of a golden age about 20 years ago in terms of number 10s. Bit of gluttony going on. But the point is that these best guys, one guy comes and he sprites it through because it's a copycat. Entire sport's a copycat. Everyone copies each other. And when you have that fundamental thing set up, naturally, you're going to end up with other guys who are doing the same thing. So you need that type of guy to come through. When that guy comes through, then you will end up seeing the resurgence of the number 10, and we will end up seeing more guys do it. And I don't think the cycle will last as long. Like last time it lasted for about 50 years. Like basically until Pep and Klopp came along and said, like, nah, we're not having this anymore. Counter pressing, right? We're just gonna gut you from the start. Number 10's like, you can go. Even Götze, he essentially was an interior. Essentially, it was Götze, Gundo, and then a number 6. That's how it was even under Klopp. And then he comes to Liverpool. He tends to do like Coutinho was essentially a left 8, except all his running was done for him by other guys. Like he was a number 10, but he was a front 4, but really he was part of the midfield 3, and he just had his running done front because they had so many guys who were top athletes surrounding him. So yeah, when that guy appears, we'll see a return. But until then, I don't think we will for a while, which is a shame because watching an elite level number 10, like my favorite players are athletic, direct, demonic monsters. But there is something special about watching number 10. They're just artists. Messi, Neymar, Maradona, Ronaldinho. Even the tape you see of Cruyff. I've not watched him in depth, so I can't really comment on him, but even so like Zidane. The best, most artful play, the best guys to watch, especially to the average person, right? So like, if you just look at someone and be like, wow, like it's not just running fast. You just think, like, this guy is doing things I didn't think were possible with a ball. So they're probably the most beautiful watch, but until they come back and they really make a trend on it, I don't know when we're going to see it happen. Which is a shame because, like I said, they're some of the most spectacular watches in all of sports. But hey, eventually they will come back because things all move in cycles, and when it happens, well, I'm pretty sure that me and you and whoever's watching this will still be around to see it, and we'll still be watching football. So yeah, that's it for today. The last few have been relatively short. There's not really been any things which I've really wanted to flesh out that long. There is something which someone mentioned in a TikTok comment the other day, which I will flesh out at some point, and that's probably going to be the next long form one, which is probably close to an hour and it's 30 minutes. But on the whole, I hope you enjoyed this one. A bit of rambling and a bit of, unusual stuff from me, as well as some very weird demonstrations with drawstring hoodies and stuff like that, and talking about, job roles. But hey, if by this point, if you don't know that I tie in strange things to strange everyday things, or just even strange non-football related things into my analysis or point fleshing, if you will, I just don't think you've been here long enough. And if you don't like it, then hey, whoops. Anyway, all the best. I'll speak to you next week. Bye-bye.